What a wonderful song, as Stephen said, to start the service with.
Thank
Terrific, just terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you're here for the first time today, we do something on a theme base, on a monthly basis. First of all, I want to welcome everybody today who's on the live stream. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you are a part of our spiritual community, and we bless your presence near and far. We send you great love too, as is kind of somewhat of a theme for today. But our annual theme for this year was the year of spiritual practice. And so if you go back and you look at what we've talked about over the last few months, you'll see that everything has to do with spiritual practice. And this month's theme has to do with the practice of chanting as a means to create a spiritual practice in our life. There are certain people, such as Audrey Larson, who thinks this is the most wonderful thing since sliced bread. But for some of us who might feel a little bit intimidated about chanting or about singing in front of other people, and since my children aren't here today, I can do whatever I want, and nobody's going to be embarrassed. But how many of us do this on a regular basis as a means to achieve some sort of spiritual practice? That remains to be seen. I mean, I know that there are some people who do it on a daily basis, just as a matter of their spiritual practice in the morning. I have questioned several people through this past week, and what I deem to be spiritually oriented people don't typically do chanting as a regular daily practice. From what I understand, chanting works best in a group situation. This is what I'm told, because we feed off the energy of one another when we're chanting. And chanting has its roots in the spiritual and in the practical. Now, the practical would be hunters, as they moved about the forest, would often chant to keep the predatory animals away. So I can see where that would be useful. For similar reasons today, though, chanting allows us to keep the predatory thoughts at bay as well. And when we're engaged in a chant exercise, our thoughts are at their purest. And since the brain cannot engage in more than one thought at a time, chanting provides a reprieve from what we would call monkey mind, or that negative chatter that we sometimes have that goes on sometimes even without our realizing it. For me, a couple of things that I kept from my days as a Catholic are two albums: Gregorian Chants with the male voices and Women in Chant, using Hildegard of Bingen's works. Now, to me, these two CDs are just phenomenal. And I can play them over and over again all day long and just be in such a state of equanimity, such a state of serenity listening to them. When I listen to those CDs, it's a transcendent experience. And I feel a closeness with spirit reminiscent of my childhood relationship with God. And I feel connected to God in a very sweet and generous way. There are some Native American chants that inspire this same connection with spirit. And if you've ever gone to, what do they call them? Like a powwow. If you've ever gone to a powwow, you can get so caught up in the repetition of the chants. And when I went to Jamaica in the 60s, we had some very interesting experiences with chants. A little frightening on the one hand, but on the other hand, it was the 60s. And I didn't notice so much about what was going on. You can figure that one out yourself. Okay. But our desire for a closer connection to spirit appears to be the intention back of all chanting. And it's done at such a deeply spiritual level. First of all, before I get into the chanting, really, I want to just talk about, there are 6 very basic principles of spirituality that could be applied to all practices, and Ernest Holmes spoke to each one of them in The Science of Mind. The first one is that there are many paths to God. There are all different kinds of ways of connecting with Spirit. And whether or not you come here on a Sunday morning, or whether there are people out there who may be listening on the live stream that don't necessarily have the need for a spiritual community like we have here on a Sunday morning, it's important to remember that each person is different, and so that what works for one person may not work for another. The second one is that we go from the many to the one. The impact of our endeavor is so much more powerful when we concentrate our efforts on the one idea that really works for us. You know, for many of us, we have explored different modalities, different faith traditions to bring us to this space where we are today. And for me, I tried everything. I know most of you who have listened on Sunday morning have heard about all the different ways in which I explored my spirituality after I got out on my own and left the Catholic Church. So we get to find one that works for us, and we focus our attention on that one. The third thing is progressing from the gross to the subtle. And this is a particular favorite of mine because what it speaks to is that our need to improve upon our spiritual practice by going from just the physical actions of doing something to a practice at a more subtle level. And focused attention on doing things with intention, as Stephen kind of spoke about in his creative thought. Doing things with intention, working in the garden, doing the dishes, painting, crafting of any kind, all provide a progression from the gross to the subtle. The Amish, for instance, are very clear about every task that they engage in is done from that place of total intention, and they're so focused on doing whatever it is they're doing, whether they're making a quilt or building a barn or doing the dishes. The fourth thing is undertaking spiritual practice as per spiritual level or capacity. And this is we can only know what we know at the capacity with which we understand our relationship to God. The spiritual practice we choose should be at our capacity or our level of understanding. And when it is, it really works. Beginning to meditate and trying to do it for 2 hours a day, if you've never done it before, might end up in frustration at best or failure at worst. You know, if I thought, when I first started out, I had to meditate for 2 hours a day, I thought, I have 2 small children. Where would I find the time to be able to do something like that? Don't do a 10-day silent retreat as your first effort. You know, try it one day at a time kind of thing. I remember a few years ago, Reverend Mike McMorrow, who succeeded me at the Granada Hills Center, he went on a 10-day silent Vipassana retreat for his first one. And he thought after the second day he was going to kill somebody. You know, and I think probably we overstep what the need is. So one day to start out with. The fifth thing is doing spiritual practice relevant to the times. Certain spiritual practices are conducive according to the time or the era in which they're done. And meditation today is very popular, and there are many different ways to do it. There are walking meditations, there's silent meditation, there's guided meditation. There are all different kinds of ways to do it. My friend, Dr. James Golden, who used to be the pastor at the Redding Center, goes around all over. He is a student of Thich Nhat Hanh, and they go to Plum Village every year in France to study with Thich Nhat Hanh. But he says, if you're meditating, you need to be sitting in a chair in an upright position with your eyes closed with no sounds around you, or at least as little sound as possible. That's his idea of meditation. But there are different ways to do it, so many different ways. But pick one and do it consistently. This is what the whole Oprah Deepak Chopra thing was about, you know, getting people in the habit of doing it on a daily basis. I just love what they do for the world. And to think that at 7 o'clock in the morning when I meditate, that I'm meditating with 300,000 other people, it just makes it all that more special. The sixth thing is offer to God one's talent or capacity. We should use the resources given by God to serve God as a part of our spiritual practice and for us to grow spiritually. In 12-step, we are called into service in a big way. If you have been involved in any 12-step program, you know that one of their catchphrases is that service is its own reward. And so people who are in 12-step do give service. Years ago, when we did the build-out at the Granada Hills Center, not to break anyone's anonymity, but Reverend Mike would say it, that he is a recovering alcoholic, and he was brand new to the center when we did the build-out there. And as a means of giving service, he brought 5 men from his AA group who hung all the doors in our center for us, a cost that would have been prohibitive for us, but they did it as a gesture of being in service to our center and fulfilling their requirement of service in their 12-step program. So this was just a wonderful thing. So all that being said, in in 2 weeks, when we begin living your life's purpose, we will begin the process of using chant to enhance our spiritual self-discovery. And if you think that you know what your life's purpose is, you're working your passion right now, you're involved in it, I can tell you that this class, it's 8 weeks long. I'm teaching it with Reverend Les DeMarco, who is a master teacher. He never ceases to amaze me. That in this process, you will uncover some things about yourself where you can move into a greater understanding of who you are as a spiritual being. Purpose as a spiritual concept rather than purpose as a concept of doing or being something out in the world. So indulge me for today for a few moments, and I want you to listen to the chant that we're doing in class. And I won't, even if my children aren't here, I decided that it would be best for me to engage Sherry Deeds in this effort, because the chant once this particular chant gets in your head, it quickly moves from the head to the heart. And I often wake up with this chant on my mind when I wake up in the morning. And it's so much better than Small World or
feelings.
Memories.
Yeah, feelings.
Feelings, yes. Or whatever.
Whoa.
But even Small World is a chant in and of itself. But this particular chant goes, the words are like this before Sherry starts. God's the love that I am. God's the love that I am. God's the love that I am. God's the love I am. So, take it.
God is the love that I am. God is the love that I am. God is the love that I am. God's the love I am. Sing with me.
Join in.
God is the love that I am. God is the love that I am. God is the love that I am. God's the love I am. One more time. God is the love that I am. God is the love that I am. God is the love that I am. God's the love I am.
Wow, that was great. Anybody feel intimidated by that? There's everyone around us who is joining in, and in that particular moment, the focus of attention is so specific that you're in the present moment. And so you can see how that works. The 19th century poet Emily Dickinson, who's one of my favorites, once wrote, "I know nothing in the world that has as much power as a word. Sometimes I write one and I look at it until it begins to shine." You know, as a writer, I feel like that. Sometimes I am unable perhaps to articulate exactly the way I feel about something, but as I sit down in that stream of consciousness and I begin to write, that inner part of me comes out and is very definitely then secured on paper. The power of language is undeniable. It's undeniable. And as I've said before on Sunday morning, we did not develop language for me to have you know something that I need you to know. We develop language because there's something that I need to know about myself. And so when I'm communicating with somebody else, I need to listen very carefully to what it is that I'm saying to that other person, because it will always come back and reflect back on me in some way. In fact, most people on this planet certainly aren't shy about using words to express themselves. And a recent study found that each person speaks an average of over 15,000 words a day. Now, my daughter Heather, maybe more. But for most of us, 15,000 words a day is what we speak. And it's typically, we speak in order to meet our physical and emotional needs and to fulfill our material desires. We order food, we talk to coworkers, we tell jokes, we complain when things don't sort of go our way. Thus, speaking often stimulates thought, and it reinforces our extroverted tendencies and draws us into the world. You know, some people who are introverts have less of an opportunity to share who they are. And sometimes it's a very necessary thing for us to be able to draw those kinds of people out. Yet words can also be used in another way, for another purpose. And many spiritual traditions teach the practice of speaking the name of the divine, not with the intent of helping people communicate information to others, but in order to help slow down the thought process and obtain inner peace. More and more in the psychological profession, therapists are using a chant, and this is so interesting to me, are using chant to help people get centered, where many times people will come to see a therapist in a totally agitated state, and they use chant in order to bring their clients to a state of equilibrium. Catholics repeat prayers using a string of beads called a rosary. Some of you may know that. Dhikr is an Islamic devotional act, typically involving the recitation, mostly silently, of verses praising God. Nyanpho is an East Asian Buddhist mindfulness practice in which the name Amitabha Buddha is repeated. And in India, one that we know very much, repeating the divine name is referred to as japa. And this is often using a string of 108 beads. I know I've watched some of you have those beads and you wear them. I know 2 or 3 people in this congregation always wear their beads. And this is called the japa mala, similar to a rosary. And each time a name, often in the form of a series of words called a mantra, is spoken, the thumb is moved past a bead. And this practice, while it may seem simple, because it is extremely powerful when done with devotion over time. I'm not saying we all need to go out and get a rosary or we need to have japas, but it's the mindfulness of doing something consistently and with energy. Japa helps to quiet the endless stream of thoughts flowing through our overactive minds. Repeating the name of the divine can also help us to remain in the present moment. People who do japa regularly often find their ability to cope with life's up and downs increases, even during times of the day when they're not really doing their practice. And most importantly, each time we speak the divine name with love, we step closer to the divine. Years ago, when I don't think my daughter was still in teen. No, she wasn't. She had graduated from teen group and she was an advisor by this time. I was the guest speaker at a teen summer camp up in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And the outdoor sanctuary that they had at this teen camp was built up the side of a mountain. And there were benches all up the side of this mountain where the teenagers met. And there were really tall sequoia trees all around, so that when you stood at the lectern and you looked straight up, there was this incredible perspective where the trees went up to a point in the sky. And it was about just before sundown, when the long rays of the sun are really long. And they filtered through these wonderful sequoia trees to create this incredible God moment experience. There were about 200 teens that summer, and at the end of my talk, I had them say, "I am." And we went row by row. And the teens repeated it. First the first row, then the second row, then the third row, and up to the sixth row where there were 200 kids all saying, "I am," over and over and over again. It was a magical and powerful moment for all of us. And some of those teens now are young adults. And very often when we're at events and they will come up and say, "I remember you. I remember that experience of saying, 'I am' at teen camp. It was profoundly moving." And so for me, there are various things that take me to that transcendent place. And yesterday, as I was writing this talk, the Samuel Barber Adagio for Strings came on, my music of choice, on the stereo. And I was compelled to absolutely stop what I was doing and be simply in the moment with this music. It evoked something in me that no other piece of music does. And it was necessary for me to be completely in the present moment while I was listening to it. And some of you who know the piece of music will understand what I'm talking about. This is basically what chant does for us. It keeps us focused on the present moment, where our relationship to God is most apparent and we feel divinely connected. We lead such hectic lives, don't we? There's always something. And I know some of you are sitting here thinking about where you're going for lunch. You know, what's next on the agenda for today? Some of you are here who work full time. You are 9 to 5, 5 days a week. And so this is a big chunk to come here on Sunday morning out of your day when you could be doing things of a practical nature, the laundry, setting things to right or taking care of paying bills or whatever. But it's necessary sometimes for us when we feel at odds with the world to be in community like this so that we can feel the presence of God. And when our world in particular and the world in general is in a difficult state the way it is, chant reaches a part of us that needs to be touched at an in-depth level. It really is a matter of God pouring itself into me, as the song implies. Sherry, let's do this again. I just want us to have the experience of this chant again. So this time, close your eyes and block out the sensory distractions around you. And indulge me, as I said. And please, let's just go and do this 3 times this time. All righty.
God is the love that I am. God is the love that I am. God is the love that I am. God's the love I am. God is the love that I am. God is the love that I am. God is the love that I am. God's the love I am. God is the love that I am. God is the love that I am. God is the love that I am. God's the love I am.
people in our class in Oregon, where I took the training for Living Your Life's Purpose, told me that she uses this chant through her whole shower in the morning. And she added that her voice sounds much better in the shower than it does at other times. I kind of laughed because don't we all think we sing better in the shower? Yeah. It's sort of that reverberation off the walls or something. But adding a chant to an already spiritual practice of bathing, this is a spiritual practice according to most traditions. It changes how we start our days. The idea of nurturing one's body through the gentle cleansing process and the water washing over us as spirit washing over us could give a whole new meaning to the idea of a soul cleanse. Chanting provides us with an opportunity to stop the noise of the world, center ourselves in peace and tranquility, and feel a connection with our essential nature. Give it a try. Give it a try this week. I offer you this, and see what benefits that you develop from this wonderful practice. You can do it. You can do it. You can do it, knowing that with God, all things are possible. Will you, will you join me, please, in consciousness? Paulette's here. She always claps. Yes. She likes to do that. Please join me and go within to that perfect place of peace where God is the love that I am. God is the love that I am. And that the I am of who I am is that pure essence of spirit. And so I know today that as I move into this consciousness of oneness with that pure essence of spirit, I know that any disturbance that I might be experiencing in my world, or any thoughts that I may be having that are of a less than tranquil nature, can be inhibited by my use of this chant. God is the love that I am. I know as I simply allow for this idea to wash over me today, it does so from that place of absolute joy and celebration, because I know within me is the power and presence of spirit. Within me is that creative intelligence that moves in and through me in such a miraculous and wonderful way that when I am centered in truth, my life takes on a whole different perspective. When I am centered in truth, I can see my world from a place of objectivity. When I am centered in truth, I know that I see the God essence in every person in my life, even those that would appear on the surface whose behavior is inconsistent with their perfection. I know that as I recognize the power and presence of spirit moving in and through me in a consistent and diligent way, I know that my life changes for the better. That I know what it is that I need to do. I know what it is that I need to be as I walk out of this center today. I know that with God, truly all things are possible. And that as I joyfully receive and give thanks for this awareness today, knowing full well that God in my life is not only a possibility, but a probability, and as I recognize that essence of who I am moving out into my world, I can simply be the best that I know how to be. As we joyfully say together, and so it is.